Hey guys, Arm&Gun here tonight with a bit of a different video. I've had a lot of requests to do some videos around the gun laws in Canada. And with the most recent ban, there's been a lot more people, asking about laws and interested in guns in Canada, I guess anyways, and how they're classified. So I thought the time is now. Let's do a series on firearms laws. So we're gonna break this apart because, well, gun laws in Canada are pretty complicated, as they are in a lot of places, but and I can't guarantee throughout this process that you're going to like them or that they're even going to make sense to you. But I can't argue for their credibility or their purpose, but I can explain them as clearly as I can. So I'm going to try and do that. Again, as a firearms owner in Canada, the onus is really on us to understand the laws and to navigate them properly, because ignorance is definitely not a defense. If you don't know what you're doing and you get caught fumbling something up and breaking the law, man, the book can and often is thrown at you. Not even if you deserve it. That's the scary thing. So you really got to know your stuff. So anyways, I do think I'm pretty qualified to put out this video. With that said, the quick disclaimer is that my video is not legal advice. If you guys ever have any specific questions, I would always recommend discussing those with your CFO office. They're going to be kind of the ultimate authority in your province on firearms laws in Canada and how they seek to interpret them. So anyways, jumping into this, today's going to be probably the most exciting video of this series. We're going to talk about how firearms are classified in Canada. There's three classifications. There's basically your prohibited guns. Those are basically your no-nos as civilians. Then there's restricteds and non-restricteds. So we're going to go through each of the three classes, because I have all three here now that this recent ban went through, and some of my guns obviously were in that new prohibited class that got banned. So I'm allowed to have them for now. There's an amnesty in place. And so that's all fine and good. But now that I actually have a prohib handy, let's do this video. So I'm going to go through how guns get classified, and I'm going to tell you what you can do with them given their classification. So much like in the court of law, you're innocent until proven guilty, firearms in Canada are prohibited until proven otherwise, essentially. So basically, when a distributor or a gun store, whatever, someone wants to sell a new gun commercially in Canada, they need to have a classification. So the RCMP can kind of control or oversee firearms in Canada, the Royal Mounted Canadian Police. They do that, and they got a lab set up that employs technicians that just understand the law, and when they get a new rifle in, they go through it, and they are able to determine what classification it fits in, and therefore what type of licensed individual they can be sold to, and how they can be used by extension thereof. So all your manual actions like brake actions, pump actions, levers, bolt guns, all that kind of stuff, that stuff's really simple and almost always lands up in the non-restricted category. Basically, it just comes down to overall length of the firearm in its ability to be fired. So unless it's really short and has a folding stock and can be fired while folded, like, it's basically always going to end up in the non-restricted camp. However, there's a lot more confusion when it comes to semi-automatics. So it's probably easiest to start out with the prohib guns, the no-no guns, because if you're not a prohib, you're either restricted or non-restricted, and there's a very simple difference between restricted and non-restricted, at least for how the firearm is classed. There's a big difference in what you can do with them and the type of license you need to have in order to possess them. But the difference in how they're classified is very simple and very objective. So we'll save that for last. We're going to get into first the prohibs, the no-no guns, which this is not. This is actually just a restricted firearm. So we're going to put this over here, and we're going to grab an actual prohib, which until very recently I did not have. Again, as a more modern firearms owner in Canada, when all these guns were, a lot of these guns were banned in the 70s, 80s, 90s. In the 90s, I was in a stroller. I hadn't even graduated to Nerf guns yet, so of course I did not have prohibs. And in Canada, when you basically, the history has always been, if you had a gun and it was banned, you got a grandfathered license, and you were a have from there on forward. If you were a have not at that point in time, you were a have not from then on forward. So that's just always been the way. And AR-15s, which were previously straight up restricted, they were always restricted, it didn't matter, barrel length, whatever. They were a bit of an oddball classification. That's kind of because they were attempted to be banned in the past. They got overthrown because they were very popular as sport shooting guns. These things are only for basically sport shooting in Canada. That didn't swing at this time, and the ban hammer fell on them. So it's fine. I got an amnesty in place right now, so I'm fine to have this. and I'm kind of hoping for some other options down the road that are going to allow me to keep this long term. But nonetheless, today this thing's banned, so we're going to treat it as such today. So this is in the prohib pile, and let's work our way through. So, prohib, you basically have to get past 4 layers, at least as the way I understand it, the way I'm going to explain this to you, because it's probably the most easy way to understand it. There's 4 different layers that guns go through until they can get past and be up for consideration for either restricted or not restricted. So, first off, machine guns. Machine guns are out. If you can fire fully automatic, boom, you're done. You don't have a hope. That's the first layer. Machine guns have been banned in Canada since the late 70s. So, if you, like myself, accept the definition of an assault rifle as a rifle, at least one of the criteria of that as being a rifle, and one of the mandatory criteria, a rifle being capable of fully automatic fire, then really you'll see right through all of the government, the media that are talking about getting assault rifles off the streets, because they're already gone. They haven't been there from law-abiding owners anyways since the late 70s, right? So, and there's something like 500 to 1,000 people left in Canada that still have that grandfather license, because obviously they die off, right? So there's very limited people in Canada that still have that license. So they can't even take them out. They're basically housebound safe queens. You can't transport them. You can't take them to a range. And because you can't transport them to a range that approves of their fire, you can't shoot them. So it's like they're collectibles for people in their basement, basically. Next up, layer 2 is converted autos. If a gun was once a machine gun, but then was converted to be semi-automatic only, again, those are also, boom, gone. Third, well, this one came around in the early 90s. There was a very terrible shooting in the late 80s, and that ignited a huge push for gun control going forward. So in the early 90s, there were a number of bans that basically just went through kind of the Hollywood playbook, and they're like, you know what, that's black and scary. What, Joe Canada needs to own that. So that one's gone, that one's gone, that one's gone. It made no sense, this was done by people that didn't really understand firearms. So a lot of just famous guns that were prominent in movies at the time, got axed. So if Rambo was running around with it or was in a Die Hard movie, you're pretty much guaranteed that it was gone. So we lost the MP5, we lost the Uzi, the FNFAL, the Steyr AUG or AUG, whichever you prefer, AK, Galil, the list goes on and on. There's 100 or 200 or like SPAS 12, a whole bunch of guns that just got axed. And again, at this point in time, you've already lost machine guns and converted autos. So all that's left is really, truly commercial variants of these firearms, yet they still were just deemed prohib. So again, step 1, step 2, step 3 can't be one of those named prohibs. An example of a gun not passing that by today's standards is the Fostech Origin 12. If you don't know what it is, do yourself a favor, check it out. If you can own one of those things, just do it for me, buy one, or at least try one. They are amazing. I got to meet those guys at SHOT Show. I've been a huge fan of the gun for years. It's a semi-automatic mag-fed shotgun, and it is probably one of the coolest firearms, and definitely the coolest mag-fed shotgun, in my opinion. But it, in Canada, is deemed a variant of the Sega, which is deemed a variant of the AK, and therefore, she's a no-go. No fly list for the Fostech Origin 12. Anyways, so if your gun does make it past those first 3, as these all did, then you're on to number 4. And at that point in time, the lab, so they have to go in there and decide. There's a line somewhere between being, fairly easily convertible to full auto fire to being hard enough that it's a pass. So they go in, they monkey around, they do what they're going to do. There's not a published criteria for what they're allowed to do. But again, there's some line in the sand that they've drawn that they decide where, if a firearm falls past it, it's good to go. So if not, it's deemed readily convertible. A couple examples of guns that were considered readily convertible were the Atrax F90, that new kind of AUG style gun. Apparently that was not considered a variant of the AUG, but it was considered readily convertible. Also the Desertec MDR, also considered readily convertible, which is a really big disappointment. The Tavor 7 made it through though, so that's cool. Anyways, you make it past those 4, congratulations, you've been deemed appropriate for commercial sale in Canada. Now, restricted and non-restricted is very simple. The barrel has to be a minimum of 18.5 inches. If it is any less, it is restricted. If it is any more, non-restricted. And again, so it's a very simple, very arbitrary classification there, which is fine. I can live with that. It's very much like the SBR laws in the United States of America. For them, it's 16 inches. If it's 16 inches, you're good to go. If it's less than 16 inches, it becomes an SBR, and there's a tax stamp, and there's some extra paperwork you got to file. But nonetheless, that's where we're at. For that reason, this firearm here with roughly a 4.5-inch barrel, restricted. And if I had installed a barrel that was 18.6, it would be non-restricted. It would just look stupid, and I don't think there's any point to firing a pistol caliber out of an 18.6-inch barrel. It's just dumb. Anyways, this guy here, this is, by the way, this is a FAME SAF, a little 9mm PCC, really cool gun. Basically made in Chile, licensed copy of a SIG 540 series that they then converted or made their own pistol caliber carbine out of. Kind of cool, SMG, however you want to call it. But this is the 540 series. This is the 543, namely, which is the 5.56 version. It's got a barrel length clearly less than 18.6 inches. I think it's 18.5. This one's around 9.5 to 11, somewhere in there. I should know. Anyways, it's under, so it's restricted. Okay, this one here, this is a full 308. Again, caliber doesn't matter. Just the barrel length does. This one's 18.6 inches, so she's good to go. And now, really quickly before I wrap this up, what you can do with these firearms. Prohibs, if you're lucky enough to have one and you're grandfathered into owning it, you basically can't do anything with it. It kind of just sits at home. You can't transport it to a range. If you can't transport it to a range, you can't shoot it at a range. Even if, you know, a lot of ranges are cleared for firing, you know, for shooting prohibited firearms, but can't get it there, you're kind of out of luck. The only option is if you live in the country and you've gotten a private range built to spec and approved by the CFO. For restricted firearms, they're registered with the government. So there's additional licensing you have to go through, the different additional training as well to get that licensing. And then again, all firearms are registered with the government. When you buy or sell, you need to call in and have it transferred into your name off your license to another person's license type thing, right? So there's that, and there's more strict storage requirements. There's more strict transportation requirements, and you can only discharge these at an approved range. So you can't just take this in the back 40 and light off a clip. That's just, you can't. So, but you can with a non-restricted. So this is finally the last class of firearms, the most rudimentary, I suppose, the most flexible, offering the most freedom. So you need your basic class of license to own a non-restricted firearm. And again, I say basic, but by Canada standards. It still takes a lot to get into it. You need reference checks, you need training, you need licensing with the government. There's a whole bunch to go with it, and you need to present that license every time you buy a non-restricted firearm, new or used. And that license runs out every 5 years. You need to constantly renew it. And having a license in Canada as well, you're run through a database every 24 hours called CPIC. And if anything pops up, if you commit any kind of crimes and it gets posted, because all that your records get posted there, within 24 hours, it'll be picked up. The local RCMP will be notified, or police detachment, whatever is in your area. They can knock at your door. Within 24 hours, your guns are gone. So Canada has very, very modern and strict red flag laws. Anyways, just to throw that out there. So this firearm here is a non-restricted firearm. You can take this out. You can shoot it on crown land, private land. It's up to the municipality. As long as it is legal to discharge a firearm in your area, you can shoot a non-restricted firearm. There can be some caliber restrictions in certain areas, but otherwise that's kind of the case. You can hunt with it, you can do lots of stuff. It also has less onerous transportation and storage restrictions, though they still need to be locked up and separate from ammunition. And or separate from ammunition. There's that. We'll talk about storage another day. So that's the classification of rifles in Canada. What about handguns? Well, handguns are really simple. There are two types: restricted, prohibited. But this is also restricted. Very close though. So anyways, all handguns are automatically considered restricted, which means they're registered with the government. You need the extra duty classification of license, right? So these things, again, they're treated like any other restricted firearm. You can only shoot it on a range. The same storage and transportation restrictions or requirements as this guy here. So that's that. What makes a handgun prohibited is actually barrel length. 107 millimeters, I think, is the cutoff. It's about 4 1/8 inch. And the P7 just narrowly skirts that. It's within a millimeter. And actually, it's funny stories, a lot of these things are considered prohibited in Canada. Wrongly so. Just that the owners at the time, they weren't as careful. They didn't care. Like, it didn't matter back in the day if it was 4 inches or 4 inches and 1/8, right? So they would just say that, oh, they're 4 inches. So then when the ban hammer dropped, again, they were still registered. But no, all of a sudden now they're all banned. So, for example, me and a buddy, we found one of these that was still considered prohibited. It was the M10, which is the 40 Smith & Wesson version, and it was in the silver finish. His dad had the appropriate licensing to own these handguns still. He was grandfathered in. So we bought it, had it verified as having an appropriately long barrel to be reclassified as restricted. It was done so, and now we have that gun, right? So now we can possess it. Kind of cool. So, but that's, and then there's also a couple calibers like 25 ACP and 32 ACP that were just, any handgun in that caliber was also banned. They kind of wanted to get rid of the really tiny pocket pistols, things of that nature. Anyways, that's kind of down the rabbit hole. We think we've kind of gone through everything else as we need to for you guys to understand how firearms are classified in Canada. If you have any questions, hit them up in the comments below. I will add them to a kind of a comment section if I missed anything or if there's any clarifications in the description below. If you guys like my kind of content, please consider subscribing on Patreon. Throw a few bucks at the channel. I really appreciate it. It does go a long way into doing the content. Obviously, this content doesn't really cost me anything. It's just my time. But the shooting content, which I'm looking to do a lot more of in the near future, does. I've got some range upgrades going on. I've got some studio upgrades going on. And a lot more fun firearms coming for you guys to check out. So, if you guys want to do that, 100% appreciate it. Otherwise, that's all I got for you. Thanks a ton, guys. Arm&Gun out.